In the softly lit courtroom of Providence, the familiar hum of murmurs filled the air as Judge Frank Caprio adjusted his glasses and leaned forward, ready for another morning of cases. His courtroom had seen all kinds of people: students, mothers, veterans, old men struggling to pay bills. But that day, a particular case would stir something deeper in him, something that would remind everyone watching that justice could be firm yet human. The clerk called the next case. A middle-aged man walked slowly toward the bench, his hands trembling slightly as he held the citation slip. He wore a faded gray jacket, and his face carried the tired lines of someone who had been through more than most could imagine. "Good morning, sir," Judge Caprio said with his usual calm kindness. "Please step up to the podium and tell me your name." The man cleared his throat, his voice barely audible. "My name is James Carter, Your Honor." Judge Caprio glanced down at the report before him. James Carter, charged with multiple unpaid parking violations, several failure-to-appear citations, and an arrest warrant for contempt of court. The total owed was over $4,200, a steep amount for someone who looked like he could barely afford breakfast. "Mr. Carter," Caprio said softly, "it seems you've been avoiding us for quite some time." The man lowered his gaze. "I wasn't avoiding you, sir. I was just trying to survive." A ripple of quiet spread across the courtroom. Caprio studied the man's face. "Tell me what happened." James took a deep breath and began his story, a story that would stay with everyone in that courtroom long after he left. He had been a bus driver for the city for nearly 20 years. He loved his job, knew every route, every corner of Providence, and every passenger who would smile or complain during the morning rush. But one winter, his life collapsed. His wife, Marlene, had been diagnosed with breast cancer. Medical bills piled up faster than his paychecks could handle. Between hospital visits, overtime shifts, and raising their teenage daughter, his world became a blur of exhaustion. Then, one night while visiting his wife in the hospital, he parked outside the ER entrance in a no-parking zone. The ticket came the next morning, $50, then another the following week, and another when he forgot to move his car during snow removal. The fines doubled when he couldn't pay on time. Soon, letters came demanding payment. But by then, his wife was gone. After her death, James fell apart. He couldn't focus, missed shifts, lost his job, and before long, he couldn't afford rent. He lived out of his car for several months, parked behind an abandoned store. That same car, the one he called home, was eventually towed because of unpaid tickets. Judge Caprio listened silently, his eyes never leaving the man's trembling hands. The courtroom was completely still. "Mr. Carter," Caprio said after a long pause, "you had a warrant issued because you failed to appear in court multiple times. Why didn't you come?" James's eyes glistened. "Because I was afraid, Your Honor. I thought if I came here, I'd be sent to jail. I just didn't have the money." Caprio nodded slowly. "You know, Mr. Carter, you're not alone in that kind of fear. Many people come in here thinking the same thing. But my job isn't just to punish, it's to listen." He leaned back in his chair. "However, the law does require some accountability. These citations have been on record for over 2 years. Technically, you could be held in contempt for failing to appear." James looked down, his voice shaking. "I understand, sir. If I have to go to jail, I'll go." The judge's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're not eager to fight this?" "There's nothing left to fight for," James whispered. "I've already lost everything." For a moment, Caprio simply sat there, hands folded. He could have dismissed the fine entirely, as he'd done before for struggling mothers or veterans, but here there was also a long pattern of ignored summons and a warrant. His heart wanted mercy, but justice had to remain credible. "Mr. Carter," Caprio finally said, his tone firm yet kind, "you understand that failure to appear in court is a serious matter. Normally, that means time in jail. The law sets a minimum, 5 days. The courtroom went completely silent. James swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." Caprio sighed, looking down at the paperwork again before removing his glasses. You've gone through pain no one should ever have to. But the law doesn't disappear because we're in pain. It's there to remind us that even when life breaks us, we still have to face our mistakes. James's shoulders sank as if the air had left him. Caprio continued softly, I'm sentencing you to 5 days in jail. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. James's eyes widened, tears welling. But before despair could set in, Caprio raised his hand gently. However, he said, his voice steady but warm, those 5 days will be symbolic. You will not spend them behind bars. Instead, you'll spend them serving the community, helping others who are going through what you went through. James blinked, confused. I don't understand, sir. Caprio smiled faintly. There's a shelter downtown, the same one that probably helped you when you were struggling. They need volunteers. You'll go there every day for 5 days, 8 hours a day, and you'll work, helping, cleaning, serving food, anything they need. At the end of those 5 days, bring a note from the director confirming your hours. Then I'll dismiss the entire fine. No record, no jail. The courtroom broke into soft applause. Even the officers smiled. James covered his face, overcome with emotion. Thank you, Your Honor. I don't know what to say. Caprio leaned forward. Just promise me something. Promise that when you help someone else this week, you'll remember that you're not broken. You just needed someone to give you another chance. James nodded, his tears spilling freely. I promise. 5 days later, James returned to court. This time, his posture was different. His clothes were cleaner, his eyes brighter. He carried a folded piece of paper in his hand and a nervous smile. Good morning again, Mr. Carter, Caprio greeted. Did you complete your sentence? James handed over the letter. Yes, sir. I worked at the shelter all week. Helped in the kitchen, cleaned the dining area, served food to about 100 people each day. Caprio read the note aloud. James Carter volunteered faithfully for 5 consecutive days, demonstrating compassion, humility, and hard work. He inspired others and even stayed extra hours to help organize supplies. Caprio looked up with a proud smile. Seems like you went above and beyond. James nodded. I wanted to. I saw people there who were just like me. Lost, scared, invisible. Helping them helped me too. The judge's eyes softened. That's the power of second chances, Mr. Carter. They don't just change our records, they change our hearts. The courtroom erupted in gentle applause once more. Caprio struck his gavel lightly. The case against you is dismissed. You are free to go, with your record cleared and your dignity intact. James stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed. Then, with a voice full of gratitude, he said, Thank you, Judge Caprio. You gave me 5 days in jail, but those 5 days gave me my life back. Caprio smiled warmly. Then it sounds like justice has been served. That day, as James walked out of the courthouse, the autumn sun broke through the clouds, bathing the street in golden light. He looked up, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, hope. He decided he wouldn't waste it. Weeks later, the same shelter offered him a part-time position. He accepted, working with others to help them find housing and stability. He began rebuilding his life from the ground up. Months after that, the producers of Caught in Providence aired his story. Viewers were moved to tears watching Judge Caprio's compassion and James's redemption. Messages poured in from across the globe, letters of support, donations to the shelter, and stories from people who said the video gave them hope to turn their own lives around. Judge Caprio, ever humble, brushed off the praise. We all make mistakes, he said in a later interview, but justice should never forget mercy. Sometimes, the best way to serve the law is to serve humanity. For James Carter, those words became a compass. He would often return to the courthouse, not as a defendant, but as a volunteer, guiding others who had lost their way. On one occasion, he even stood in the same courtroom where his journey began, this time helping a young man who faced similar parking fines and fear. When the judge asked him why he was helping, James smiled. Because someone once gave me 5 days in jail, and it saved my life. The courtroom fell silent again. But this silence was filled with something deeper: gratitude, faith, and the understanding that justice, when tempered with compassion, can heal even the most broken souls. In Providence, the morning light continued to pour through the tall windows of the courtroom where Judge Caprio presided. Another day, another case, another story waiting to unfold. Somewhere in the city, a man named James was walking to work at the shelter, whistling softly, carrying a small badge clipped to his shirt that read, "Volunteer Coordinator." He carried no more fines, no more warrants, only the memory of a judge who saw the man behind the mistake. And as Judge Caprio once said after the episode aired, justice doesn't always mean punishment. Sometimes it means helping someone find their way home. That was the story behind those 3 words that once sounded like doom but turned into redemption. 5 days in jail.